A bold move by the US recently with the creation of a Bitcoin strategic reserve. The initiative has sparked debate, with some calling it a campaign stunt, while others point to real legislative progress. For more, we're joined by Brian Dement. It's good to see you again. What was some of the significance of President-elect Trump's announcement about this Bitcoin strategic reserve? Tell us all about it.
So what's exciting is we're kind of at this AD-BC moment for Bitcoin. Bitcoin has had the kind of headwinds of government and legislation for the last 16 years. What Trump did in July of this year at the Bitcoin conference in Nashville was that he announced officially part of his platform is going to be a strategic Bitcoin reserve. Now, it's one thing if that was a campaign promise, but Trump has repeatedly talked about this. This isn't something that he forgot about after 3 months. He was on the floor of the New York Stock Exchange the other morning, and he reiterated his sentiments about the strategic reserve. Now, what a lot of people don't understand is that the U.S. already holds 200,000 Bitcoin. Now, this was from seizures or government actions. The U.S. has not treated that as reserve status. So this is going to roll in a few phases. The first phase, what Trump is talking about doing on day one, which is well within his power in executive orders, is that he's going to take that 200,000 and declare it a strategic reserve. That will be the basis for it. So that won't be any additional buying of Bitcoin right away, but that will be a different framing of the Bitcoin that the U.S. already has. That's about 1% of all of the Bitcoin in existence that will ever be in existence. What's going to happen over the next probably about 3 months is the introduction of, well, there's already been the introduction of legislation. It's going to be the signing of legislation, which would be the purchase of an additional 800,000 Bitcoin to get the U.S.'s stockpile to 1 million Bitcoin total. And that, all the legislation that has been put forth so far is a 20-year hold on that legislation. So that's kind of the way that this is looking as far as easing into it. Okay. That's not even considering all the other nations that are getting excited about it, but Trump has put that out there and has been made publicly aware.
Absolutely playing the long game here. So why do some skeptics believe that it's just a campaign stunt if what we're seeing is sort of so official in so many ways?
Yeah, well, it's people that just clearly don't understand that Bitcoin is registered as a commodity. It's not a security. This is well within the legal framework for a country to hold a commodity reserve. We do this with things like oil. We do this with things like corn or other commodities. And so this isn't actually that crazy of a move. Now, the fact that it is finite, that there are only 21 million, the U.S. is in this kind of economically strategic position to have the high ground on that. And so it makes sense that if you don't understand Bitcoin, that you might say that this is a campaign stunt because they don't understand the economic implications. But in the same way that we hold gold, because that is something that is country neutral. It's country agnostic. And so whether you're in China, Russia, or the United States, gold has value because everybody around the world wants it.
Absolutely.
We're in the digital age. Bitcoin is the digital gold. And so we would actually be behind if we don't do this. Now the US with Trump is not only going to not be behind, we are going to be ahead of the 8 ball. Why wouldn't Trump want to do that? That's the question I would pose back to somebody who was skeptical about this.
Yeah, and such a great explanation from you there, Brian. But I'm curious to know a little bit more about the Strategic Reserve Bill. Take us through a little bit about the machinations of it.
So it's predominantly championed by Senator Cynthia Lummis. Now, it has bipartisan support, not only in the House, but in the Senate as well. So both chambers of Congress are bipartisan in support of this. What it's going to do is it's going to have a 500 Bitcoin per day purchasing. So it's not 800,000 Bitcoin bought on Tuesday afternoon. It is going to be a rolling purchase of Bitcoin. And this is similar to what smaller countries have already done and had a big win with. El Salvador, a much smaller economy. They're the 104th largest economy in the world, only 6 million people, but they've been buying since 2021, 1 Bitcoin per day, which is the equivalent for their economy and what we're going to do with 500 Bitcoin per day. So it's not out of the realm of what sovereign nations have already done. And this is what you see. You see the small players do it, and then big players come along later. This is true in business. This is true in any kind of adoption curve. And that's the way that this legislation is written. It's understanding the adoption curve of not only new technology, but new forms of money. History is full of new forms of money, right? We've seen new forms of money come along. Now, what's great about Bitcoin is that it's not making the recipe on the fly. We get to look back at history and look and see what are the best qualities of all of the best forms of money that have ever existed. It needs to be difficult to produce. It needs to be out of the hands of a central party, and it needs to have a capped finite supply. Bitcoin has all of those qualities, kind of similar to gold. Now, gold isn't capped in supply, but where Bitcoin really wins out is that it's digital. And we're in the digital age, and we are entering into a paradigm of artificial intelligence and robotics. And so it makes sense for our core reserve asset to be a digital asset that is out of the hands of any kind of central authority.
Again, very well explained there. And if the Aztecs can use cocoa beans as a form of, money, I feel like Bitcoin isn't that far-fetched. But what are some of the implications, Brian, just to finish, when it comes to the 1 million Bitcoin being held for 20 plus years?
So what you're going to see around Bitcoin is there's going to be less selling pressure because the institutions that are coming in, like the United States, are going to be holders of Bitcoin. They're not going to be traders of Bitcoin. So a lot of people think in terms of, oh, I remember 4 years ago, there was a big run up in Bitcoin, and then there was a 40 or 50% correction in Bitcoin. Or two market cycles ago, 8 years ago, there was a 70% correction. That was because those markets were fueled by individual traders, regular guys, you and me, maybe our college roommates, that sort of thing, that were sitting in front of a computer screen and day trading Bitcoin. Now, when the market isn't very exciting, those players, they sell Bitcoin, and that, sometimes they play on leverage. And so that's why you see these really significant crashes. We're entering an entirely new paradigm where the institutions that are buying are orders and orders of magnitude bigger than those little retail traders, but they're not traders. They are holders. And so there's something like 45 to 50 million millionaires in the world. There's only 21 million Bitcoin. So we're entering a phase where people are starting to realize that not even every single rich person can have an entire Bitcoin. There is going to be a scramble for bits and pieces of Bitcoin. And it changes the fundamental analysis of how people are looking at that. You don't need to have a whole Bitcoin. You can have portions of Bitcoin, because that will have significant amounts of value. That all stems from the biggest entity on planet Earth, the United States, buying and holding, not trading, not using it as payment. They're buying and holding that asset. It changes the game for how people think about money. And now this is leading into what the next phase will be. And I've written extensively about this in my book, Parallel. The next phase will be about the economy that evolves around that. And this is how money goes. Money goes in phases. It starts out as a collectible. It goes to a store of value phase, which is where Bitcoin is at right now. It's wrestling through its store of value phase. Then it turns into a medium of exchange. And finally, the last phase would be a unit of account. So if we're in the store of value phase right now, the next phase, whether that's 5 years or 10 years from now, will be the medium of exchange, where people use it in transactions. Now, it's already used in transactions today, but there's countries like Thailand or El Salvador who have already done this, that are issuing legislation so that Bitcoin will be a medium of exchange. They will actually recognize it as a national currency. It won't necessarily be their only national currency. They might also use US dollars or rupees or whatever else they want to use, but they will have a sister currency in the form of Bitcoin that their residents, their citizens, will be able to use. So if you want to think strategically ahead, you can think about, well, what are the implications of a Bitcoin economy, a medium of exchange in Bitcoin? This thing is going to be absolutely huge. It's going to be a bigger revolution to the way the world operates than the internet was.
Yeah, it's incredible to speak about. And of course, the last few years, we've obviously seen it go up and down, and the volatility has been explained a bit. But watching it ride the way it is, and governments taking hold of it and treating it very seriously, is so interesting to see. Brian, I look forward to speaking to you again down the track. Appreciate your time, as always.
I'll be back. Thank you.
This is In America Today.